Hello all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Katie and today I'll be talking through the 18 books that I finished during the month of July. July was full of social plans, so I'm really proud of myself. I'm sorry that this video is so late. School has started for me and my body has struggled to adjust. I've pretty much come home and been a zombie every day after school for the first couple weeks, so better late than never. Before we get started, be sure to like and subscribe if you want more bookish content from me. Now let's get to the books. The first book I finished during July was Real Queer America, LGBTQ Stories from Red States by Samantha Allen. Samantha Allen is a trans woman who grew up Mormon and went to Brigham Young. So she starts her journey in Provo, Utah, and drives around the country interviewing activists who have created communities in places like Arkansas and Tennessee and Indiana, in places that are not considered queer friendly. There's a whole chapter about Bloomington in this book because that's where Allen met her wife while she was in graduate school at IU. So especially for Midwestern progressives and queer activists, I highly recommend this book. Gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next up, my husband Ian and I finished our audiobook that we had been working on for a while, and that was The Cadaver King and the Country Dentist by Radley, Balko, and Tucker Carrington. So a couple years ago, we discovered that my husband, who doesn't love to read, did like listening to the nonfiction titles I was working on Audible. So ever since, I've been trying to find things that I think he would like, and this one was perfect because it was a combination of social justice and true crime and like medical stuff. He's a pharmacist, so he loves this kind of stuff. So this book is an in-depth investigation of the Mississippi death investigation system, particularly focusing on the deaths of 2 young girls and the Black men who were wrongfully convicted of killing those young girls. It goes a lot into the history of the justice system in the South and how racist it is, and also into the shoddy forensics that were at play during these cases. It was just a really wild ride. I learned all sorts of crazy things about Jim Crow justice and bite mark evidence, and it was just perfect for anyone that loves true crime or racial justice, anti-racist learning. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I read several excellent graphic novels in July, starting with The Girl and the Sea by Molly Knox Ostertag. It follows Morgan, who grew up on a really isolated island and is living as a closeted queer young woman. She meets Kelty, who is a Selkie, which was really cool, and she starts a relationship with her that she then tries to hide from her family and her close-knit group of friends. This was just wholesome and adorable. I loved the romance. I loved the dynamics with her group of friends. And there's even some environmental activism in it, which I thought was a really cool element to add to the story. Totally appropriate for middle and high school. Love the queer rep. I loved it. 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I listened to Tweet Cute by Emma Lord, and this one was a great little surprise for me. I picked it up in an Audible daily deal, and it just ended up being so much better than I could ever have hoped. So this follows Pepper, an overachiever who is trying to navigate her parents' complicated divorce, which is made even more complicated by the fact that her parents co-own a successful burger chain together, and Jack, whose parents own a struggling like family business deli in Brooklyn. And they start a Twitter war that's very snarky, a la like the Arby's Twitter account. And they fall in love, obviously, and they realize they both go to the same school. And there was just so much more to it than that. That's already a cute premise, but they both had really complex family dynamics that were explored very well and things that they were working on like for themselves. I love it when a romance has more character growth for each person in the couple as individuals rather than focusing entirely on the romance. This was adorable. YA contemporary gold, in my opinion. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Wain, poems by Rachel Plummer, illustrated by Helene Boppert. My friend Jordan lent this to me, and she actually bought it in Scotland. This is a young adult poetry collection that is subtitled LGBT Reimaginings of Scottish Folklore. This was a really cool concept. I would say there's nothing particularly earth-shattering about the poetry, but just conceptually, for example, There's a poem about what if the Loch Ness Monster were non-binary. Combined with the gorgeous artwork throughout made this definitely a worthwhile read. I will say that I didn't really know enough Scottish folklore going into this, and so I was a little bit confused about some of the stories they chose. But if you're into mythology and folktales, definitely check this out. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up one of my most highly anticipated novels of the year, and that was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Taylor Jenkins Reid has written 2 of my favorite adult novels of all time, Daisy Jones and the Six, and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So I was really, really looking forward to this, and I had extremely high expectations. So in this book, we follow the Riva siblings. There are 4 of them, who are famous in part because they have a very, very famous and very absent father. So they're a pretty dysfunctional family, and you learn all about them through flashbacks to how their parents met. But all of the action in this book takes place over the course of 24 hours, the day of the famous Riva party that they throw in their mansion in Malibu every summer. This had everything I love. It had a whole bunch of different characters whose stories and lives were interweaving over the course of this party. It had Hollywood glam. It had family drama. It had really tight-knit family relationships. I loved this so much. I need all of her books to become movies and TV shows because they would all be so good. This was not quite up to Evelyn Hugo level, in my opinion, because that book is like, read it if you haven't. But I definitely gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. It was wonderful. I read 2 historical romances during the month of July, both by my bae, Lisa Kleypas, and I started with Again the Magic. I did not know this book existed, but it is a Wallflowers prequel. If you've read The Wallflowers, this follows Marcus, Lord Westcliffe's older sister, Helene. So in this book, she falls in love with a stable boy when she's a teenager, and they have this beautiful, pure love. And then her father finds out, and her father is the worst. So she ends up having to convince McKenna, the love of her life, that she doesn't actually love him, so he will leave the estate so he doesn't get murdered by her father, basically. So then fast forward, McKenna comes back to the estate. He's become a super successful businessman in America, and he's all like, I'm gonna get revenge on this lady that broke my heart. But then obviously they rekindle their romance. So this had so much pining in it, and I loved every moment. This is maybe one of my favorite historical romances that I have read thus far. Also, their younger sister got a little side story romance, which was also steamy and wonderful and adorable. And I loved everything about this. 5 out of 5 stars. Lisa can do no wrong. Okay, so this next book tore my heart into a million pieces, and that was Starfish by Lisa Fipps. So in this book, we follow Ellie, a girl who is being horrifically bullied for being fat, not just by her peers, but also by her siblings and by her mother. This is a middle grade novel in verse, and it is just about Ellie coming to understand herself and what she's been through and how to stand up to the bullies and especially to her mother. Oh my gosh, this was intense. If you experienced bullying in middle school or high school, just be wary. I cried a lot. My friends are going to be like, Katie, you cry all the time for every book you read. And that's true. Yes. But the bullying scenes in this were particularly intense. My favorite thing about this book was the relationship that Ellie has to her therapist. Yay, normalizing therapy in YA and middle grade books / also just in general. Yay, therapy. This was stunning, and it was a quick read because it's in verse, and I definitely expect this to be on a lot of people's best of the year lists for children's middle grade YA. 5 out of 5 stars for sure. I wish this book had existed when I was a child because I needed it. Next up, I picked up some comics. I picked up the Backstagers series, and I read the first 3 volumes. Volume 1 had to go back to the library, but here are volumes 2 and 3. So in this series, we follow Jory, a Black teen who has just enrolled in an all-boys private high school. And in an effort to find somewhere where he might fit in, he joins the stage crew in the theater department. And he discovers that the backstage area of this theater is literally magic. And it's got like secret tunnels and passageways and rooms that disappear and reappear other places. Like, think very Harry Potter. And it was just about the literal magic of theater. And it had great queer rep. And there's a very cute romance between Jory and another one of the main characters. And I loved every moment of these. I sat and read the first 3 volumes in an afternoon. They were so cute. So cute. If you like comics, you will love these. I gave volume 1 4 stars. Volume 2, I ended up giving 4.5 stars because you meet the sister school and all the like girl tech crew, and so great. And then volume 3, I ended up only giving 3 stars because it's not an actual volume. It's like holiday specials. And I didn't want like cutesy little 2-page comics. I wanted more story. Dagnabbit. I hope there's a new volume soon. I love these. All right, next I picked up Party of Two by Jasmine Guillory. This is book 5 in her wedding date series, and this might have been my favorite in the series thus far. In this, we follow Olivia Monroe, who has just quit at her very sexist law firm in New York City and moved to LA to start her own firm. She's in a hotel bar, and she has a great little meet cute and flirtation with a random cute stranger, and then she goes back to her room and discovers that it was actually California's junior senator, Max Powell. They reconnect and end up getting kind of serious despite Olivia's misgivings. And the conflict in this was just so realistic and well written, in my opinion. Like, there would be conflict if you were a Black woman who started dating a white man politician and had to figure out, how much you wanted to be in the limelight, making sure you weren't being used by your boyfriend's staff for good publicity and all this excellent stuff. Their chemistry was so cute. Jasmine Guillory is outstanding. She's a great romance novelist. If you like contemporary romance, you will love this series. I also liked how this one fit into the broader arc of all the different characters, because you see all of them in each book, and I love that about this series. Gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up another graphic novel, and that was Penny by Carl Stevens. This is a weird little book that my mom recommended to me, and it's a collection of comics that are the philosophical musings of this house cat named Penny. And it actually turned out to be really hilarious because it's just everyday situations, and what if your cat had very deep philosophical thoughts about like when you leave for vacation for 3 days and don't leave enough food. This would be a great gift for the cat lover in your life if you're thinking about Christmas. Gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up another highly anticipated book for this year, and that was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Emily Henry wrote and released Beach Read last year or 2 years ago, and that was such a great book, so I had very high expectations for this one. So this is a best friends to lovers romance that centers Alex and Poppy, who met in college and no longer live in the same city, but they reunite every summer for an epic summer trip. But at the beginning of the novel, they are estranged for some mysterious reason. So Poppy convinces Alex to take one last trip with her to try to, salvage their friendship and also maybe turn it into something more. This was wonderful. The way they told the story was bouncing between the present and various summer trips from the past, which sort of let us unravel slowly where they went wrong and, get progressively more frustrated about why they haven't, become more than friends yet. This was lovely. Both characters had great growth throughout the story, which is very important to me in a romance. I might have even liked this more than I liked Beach Read, and I liked Beach Read a lot. Gave this 5 stars. The other historical romance that I picked up this month was Mine Till Midnight, which is book 1 in the Hathaway series by Lisa Kleypas. This also takes place in the world of the Wallflowers, which I love. I love getting to see my old favorites over and over again in new books. So this follows the Hathaway family, who are technically members of the peerage, but they're in debt and they've lost their parents and they're just hot messes all around. So in this first book, we follow Amelia Hathaway, who is trying desperately to hold her family together. And she starts the novel by trying to retrieve her brother, who's a rake and just like a drunk and a big ol' hot mess. And she goes to Jenner's, which is a gambling club you'll recognize if you've read The Wallflowers, and meets Cam Rohan, the mysterious, savvy manager of the club who helps her find her brother. Cam is half Roma, which adds some really interesting elements of 19th century racism into the mix for this series, which I'm liking so far. The chemistry in this book was just off the charts excellent. It also introduced some mystery elements about Cam's heritage, and there's another Roma character who is like a old family companion of the Hathaways, and there might be a connection between them. I just love where it's going. I'm trash for Lisa Kleypas. Gave this 5 stars, obviously. I did pick up one professional development oriented read this month, and that was LGBTQ Voices in Education, Changing the Culture of Schooling. This is a set of academic essays that's geared toward teachers and teacher educators about how to meet the needs of students and staff members who identify as LGBTQ+. This was more geared toward middle and high school teachers, I would say, but I did learn quite a bit. They referenced what's called the GLSEN School Climate Survey, where they poll teens who identify as LGBTQ+ about their experiences in schools, and some of their statistics were horrifying. Like the number of kids that have endured harassment or abuse, not just from their peers, but also from their teachers. Like, what? No. So there was a lot in here about how to be an advocate for those kiddos, things you can do as a teacher just on the day-to-day, as well as what college professors can do to address any homophobia that they might find in their teacher candidates, which is like super, super important. Overall, this wasn't super relevant to my day-to-day, but it did galvanize me to continue to be an advocate for LGBTQ issues in my classroom as an elementary school teacher. Gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I finished the month with 2 just top-notch fantasy novels. The first one was The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This was a reread for me that I did for a book club that I am in, and this for sure holds up. It had been a long time since I read this, and I loved rereading it, and just it felt like visiting old friends for the first time in a long time. So this is book 1 in the Kingkiller Chronicles. And in this book, at the start of the novel, we follow Kvothe, who is in hiding and running an inn in the middle of nowhere. And he's discovered by a traveling scribe and begins to tell the story of his life. This is just, in my opinion, like top tier fantasy, probably the best fantasy novel that I have personally ever read. And I hear that from other people too. It's not just me. I love Kvothe. This first book has a magic school. We love a magic school. So fun. And he's a musician and he has red hair. And the way that Rothfuss manages to just slowly tease out this world without ever, being too expository is just so good. So well written. Read it. I cannot wait to reread book 2. 5 out of 5 stars for sure. One of my favorite novels of all time. Finally, the last thing I read this month was Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This book has been so raved about on BookTube that I was almost nervous to pick it up, but it did not disappoint. Oh my gosh. Loved it so much. So in this book, we follow Bree, whose mother has just passed away in a car accident, and to escape her grief, she enrolls at an early college residential program at UNC, her mother's alma mater. Her first night on campus, she witnesses a demonic attack and this mysterious boy who kills the demon, and she is thrust into this world of the Legendborn, a secret society of demon hunters that are loosely affiliated with Arthurian legends, which was really, really, really cool. I don't want to spoil it because I loved going in with very little information about this, but there is so much cool social commentary in this book about the legacy of slavery in the South, about generational trauma caused by racist experiences, about grief. Just so cool. And the fact that she uses fantasy to have all these conversations was just like, what are you doing, Tracy? That's so cool. I had never read anything like this. I cannot wait for book 2. I loved this so much. If you like fantasy, if you like diverse YA, pick this up. Like, the internet was not joking. It's just as good as everybody says. 5 out of 5 stars. All right. Wow. I read some really, really great books in July. I'm glad I got to some of these that were really high priorities on my TBR before school started, because now I don't have nearly as much time to read. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of these and what you thought of them, or if you have any recommendations for me. I'm always looking for great new books to read. And for now, that's all she read.